Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. In order to participate in the Mental Health Awareness Month reading event hosted by Marilyn Maya Mendoza and Kim at Middle of the Book March, I have read Kay Redfield Jamison's newest work, Fires in the Dark, Healing the Unquiet Mind. Dr. Jamison is the Dalio Professor in Mood Disorders and a professor of psychiatry at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. And she's also an honorary professor of English at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. I have read two of her previous books, The Unquiet Mind, which is a memoir dealing with her own experiences with bipolar disorder, first diagnosed when she was 17, and also Night Falls Fast, Understanding Suicide, the first major book in decades written about suicide and its pull, in particular among the young. This newest book by Dr. Jamison can be described as an expansive cultural history of the treatment and healing of mental suffering. Jamison writes about the qualities that make a great healer and the function of the imagination and memory in the regeneration of the mind. Jamison says that she wrote this book because there simply isn't enough emphasis on the role of psychotherapy in the healing process, and psychotherapy done well. In the first part of the book, she traces the origins of modern psychotherapy to the battlefields of World War I, where doctors were treating what today would be called post-traumatic stress disorder. Then she goes even further back throughout history to examine how mental illness has been treated throughout the ages. She focuses here on several important historical figures in the history of medicine and the treatment of mental illness. One such healer is Dr. William Osler, famed Johns Hopkins physician. Earlier in his life, Osler had treated the poet Walt Whitman, who had been a volunteer nurse in the Civil War. When Osler's only son, Revere, was killed in World War I, Osler sought solace in the poetry of Whitman, which he had found too raw before the experience of losing his son. Jamison writes that both Whitman and Osler, quote, knew how to tend wounds and lay on hands, how to offer hope. They knew that words give meaning to suffering, that words are a means to heal the living and remember the dead. Also in this first section of the book, Jamison focuses in depth on the work of Dr. W.H.R. Rivers, who treated soldiers during World War I, including the poet Siegfried Sassoon. She probes into how psychological pain has been healed through the ages and what it takes to be a great healer. The most effective healers, she notes, accompany sufferers on their journey toward wellness. And they extend hope and reason to live and endure and prevail. In Jamison's view, Dr. Rivers is the best example of the effective healer who knew instinctively that psychotherapy is, quote, the quest to find out who the patient is and how he or she came to be that way, close quote. The second section of the book examines mental illness from the patient's perspective, including the author's own experiences with bipolar disorder beginning in her late adolescence. She notes in this section that it is not only patients who need to be healed, but the doctors themselves who need healing as well. She emphasizes in this section that healing is not simply about ameliorating symptoms. She is a proponent of the combination of medication and psychotherapy, talk therapy. She believes that she would be dead if it were not for the right medications. But talk therapy is also a most important component of healing. It provided her, she writes, with a sanctuary. It saves lives, she argues. It gives you ultimately the capacity to understand what you have been through and to deal with it. Quote, psychotherapy and medication underpin the modern treatment of mental suffering. Thanks to science, they continue to evolve, but to heal requires more active engagement of the imagination, learning, and seeking. Close quote. In the third section of the work, Dr. Jamison focuses on the arts and their role in healing. She discusses in depth several creative artists, including writers and musicians. She examines mental illness in artists and also the vital role of the arts in healing. There is an extensive discussion of Paul Robeson, bass baritone vocalist, actor, athlete, lawyer, and political activist, and also the son of a man who escaped from slavery in his teens. Jamison sees Robeson as similar to Dr. Osler in that he too was both a healer and a sufferer. Like Osler, Robeson too refused to look away from the racist treatment he and his countrymen suffered. Robeson used his art as a way to combat racism in his day and also the rise of fascism in the world, and to make sense of his own pain for himself and for others. A victim of both rampant racist treatment and also of McCarthyism in the United States, Robeson was brought before the House Un-American Activities Committee and was blacklisted throughout the country and had his passport revoked. Robeson had long struggled with depression, but he had a complete emotional collapse after what he endured at the hands of the U.S. government and FBI. He had several suicide attempts and hospital admissions. And although never formally diagnosed with what was then called manic depressive illness, now called bipolar disorder, he suffered from acute depressive episodes and also manic symptoms. He was in and out of hospitals for years. When he died, over 5,000 people attended his funeral. Jamison features Robeson as an artist and a civil rights activist whose art helped to heal others. He, quote, inspired and gave balm to those who suffered more than he. He healed through this example and through music. He accompanied the vulnerable. And there's that word again of accompaniment. She sees the therapist, she sees the healer as one who accompanies the sufferer. This is not an easy book to read or to describe. At times, I felt a bit lost at sea in its long chapters about so many disparate historical figures. I wasn't always sure where we were going or how one figure she was describing was going to relate to the overall theme of healing. But ultimately, I came away with a better understanding of the complexity of the healing process, of the many component parts that might include medication and extensive talk therapy with a skilled practitioner, and meaningful work and artistic expression too. Jamison writes, quote, "We all look in our different ways to find the way back from pain, to find the way to peace and redemption. We look for purpose, for the rock that is higher than us. We look to healers for courage and the way forward. We look to them for convoy and toughness, for knowledge and humanity. We see the balm in Gilead that makes the wounded whole." So that's a bit about Kay Redfield Jamison's newest book, Fires in the Dark, Healing the Unquiet Mind, which I read for Mental Health Awareness Month and which I highly recommend. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.